Siegecrafter Blackfuse is the first boss in Downfall, the final wing of Siege of Orgrimmar. And this boss, while being rather simple, has a few difficult mechanics that need to be properly handled or else a wipe is imminent. A small amount of preparation before the pull should be handled, as at least one player needs to handle the conveyor belts, which I'll talk about later in the video. First off, the boss applies a stacking nature damage debuff from his electrostatic charge, which increases the damage of further charges. And generally, you will swap tanks at around 3 stacks. However, the stack number is not what constitutes a tank swap in this fight. Instead, tanks should swap every time an automated shredder spawns, and the tank who was tanking Blackfuse needs to pick up the shredder. While in Raid Finder, the boss will not heal the shredder, unlike in Flex and Normal. However, it should still be tanked away from the group to prevent its death from above mechanic from hitting players in the raid. The electrostatic debuff also enables the tank to deal bonus damage to the shredder. I will talk more on tanking the shredder after I've covered a few details about the boss's other abilities. It is also important to note that every time a shredder dies, or one of the devices on the conveyor belt, that I'll talk more about later, dies, the boss will gain Protective Frenzy, which increases his attack speed by 100%. Tanks and healers need to simply be prepared for this sudden spike in damage. The boss will launch out saw blades periodically at random players, which will hover in place and deal damage to all players who touch it, so simply avoid it. Periodically, a shockwave missile will hit the ground near players, with an expanding line of drills will begin erupting from the ground, damaging and knocking up players who are struck. Again, simply avoid standing in this. A laser turret will occasionally activate and target random players. Players need to run away from the raid group when targeted to avoid the laser, which will follow the targeted player, and this will also superheat the ground, creating fire patches where the laser strikes. Again, don't stand in it. Crawler mines will occasionally spawn and target random players. They will then chase down the player and explode, damaging all players for a fairly large amount of damage. The mines must be killed before they reach their targeted player. Finally, a giant electromagnet will occasionally spawn, which will pull all the saw blades off the battle area and begin pulling and dealing small amounts of damage to all players. Simply heal through the damage and run against the pole. Death from Above is an ability the automated shredder will use, where it will leap into the air and come crashing down, dealing a large amount of damage to all players near it. If tanked away from the group, only the tank needs to worry about this mechanic. This shredder will also take a huge increase in damage after landing from using this ability, so any burst damage abilities the tank has should be used after this. The shredder will also take damage from all boss mechanics. This includes crawler mines exploding, the saw blades, the erupting drills, and most importantly, the fire patches left behind by the laser turret. Standing in the fire patches causing a stacking dot effect that quickly ramps to unhealable levels, so do not stand in yourself, but sitting the shredder in the fire kills it very quickly, even if for some reason the tank tanking the shredder has no electrostatic charge debuff. DPS should never have to help out with the shredder, as it takes a drastically reduced damage from players without the electrostatic debuff, but DPS should be aware just in case the tank is not entirely knowledgeable in tanking this encounter. Now, the laser turret, erupting drills, crawler mines, and the magnet are not directly initiated by the boss. Instead, they are devices that exist on a nearby conveyor belt near to where you will be tanking the boss. At least one player, though if DPS is very low, 2 can go, needs to jump into a nearby pipe, as shown here, and come out on top of the belt, where you can kill the devices before they are fully constructed and attack the raid with their respective mechanics. Generally speaking, you will always kill the crawler mines, as these are the most disruptive to the fight. Once you kill the mines, the other devices will become invincible, and you should return and help with the boss fight by either jumping into the pipes at the end of this belt, or simply waiting until the boss pulls you off of it. However, if you wait, you will not have any uptime on the boss, as you will immediately need to get back on the belt to handle the next wave of devices. This is, however, safer if you are not confident in your jumping ability. While on the belt, you will need to avoid the giant lasers, as they will hit you for a large amount of damage otherwise. Have a player handle the belt correctly, tank swap and kill the shredder properly, kill the crawler mines whenever they do spawn, and of course, avoid damaging ground effects, and Blackfuse will go down. The second boss in the Siege of Orgrimmar, Downfall, are the Klaxxi Paragons, where you must fight all 9 of the Klaxxi, 3 at a time. There are a lot of mechanics in this fight, though many are fairly ignorable in Raid Finder, So to avoid this being a 15-minute explanation, I'll try to cover them as quickly as possible. Every time a Paragon is killed, the other active Paragons fully heal and gain a 10% increase in damage, so AoEing and cleaving is useless in this fight. Maximize your single target DPS only. Don't try to pad your damage meters. An experienced player in your group should be marking which Paragon is the current focus target, and all DPS should stay on the marked target only. The first 3 Paragons that will descend are Skier the Bloodseeker, Isek the Swarm Keeper, and Rikal the Dissector, and every time a Paragon dies, a new one will join the fight. The other Paragons will be fully healed and gain a 10% increase in damage. In Raid Finder, the order you kill them in is not immensely important, save for Corvin the Prime, who should be burned the instant he joins the fight. Aside from that, it's merely a good idea to not leave any particular Paragon alive too long. Skier should be the first target, as he summons blood adds that will walk toward the most injured Paragon and heal them. DPS should burn these adds down as much as possible, then focus back on the boss. This boss also applies a stacking debuff on his main tank that increases the damage taken by Rikal the Dissector. So one tank cannot have both Rikal and Skier. Rikal should be the next target after Skier dies, and likewise, his ability is a stacking debuff that increases the damage taken by Skier. Corvin the Prime will join shortly after Rikal dies, and should immediately be targeted, bloodlust blown, and focused down, as he is easily the most dangerous Paragon. Tanks should make sure to face Corvin away from the raid, as he will occasionally shield bash his main target, stunning the tank, and immediately then using an ability called Vicious Assault. Vicious Assault applies a bleed and hits for an incredible amount of damage, easily decimating even geared tanks. For under-geared tanks, cooldowns must be used to survive this. Alternately, the other tank can taunt off halfway through the Vicious Assault to split the damage, making it easier for healers to keep up. Corvin will occasionally encase the most injured Paragon, including himself, in Amber, making them invincible for 10 seconds. The Amber is a targetable mob, and must be targeted and burned down quickly. If it is not, it will heal whatever Paragon it is targeted for a very large amount. After Corvin is dead, DPS should focus on Garrosh. Garrosh will occasionally dash about the room randomly, stunning players that he comes into contact with, or players that come into contact with the players he has stunned. Players should spread out to avoid large number of players being struck by this ability. Zeril of the Poisoned Mind should generally die next, and he applies a stacking debuff to the tank that increases the damage a tank takes by Kilruck, the Wind Reader. Tanks need to be mindful of that whoever tanks Zeril cannot also tank Kilruck. Zeril will also mark players with either a red, blue, or yellow debuffs, and then will occasionally activate these debuffs to do their respective mechanics. To make it simple and short, spread apart if you have the red buff, stack with others if you have the blue one, and move out of the yellow poison cloud if you have the yellow. Isek should generally die after Zeril, as his stacks will be getting rather high at this point, and though he does not actually need to be tanked, and simply AoEs the raid. He has one ability that needs to be paid attention to, called Aim. Aim targets one random player in the group and roots them in place, and, after around 6 seconds, he'll deal a very large amount of damage to the target. However, it is reduced by everyone in between him and his aim target, so players not affected by his aim need to stand in between his sec and his target to reduce the targeted player's damage taken. Mjolkuk should be the next kill, and he will deal damage to random players, as well as cast an ability called Insane Calculation, Fiery Edge, which, depending on random marks that he applies to all players in the raid, will connect these players with a line of fire. Players simply need to position themselves so this line is not hitting any other players. Kaztik the Manipulator simply damages random people in the raid and generally should be killed next. And finally, Kilruck the Wind Reader applies a stacking debuff on his tank that makes it so that his tank cannot also tank Zeril, and will periodically cast an ability called Gouge, shortly followed by Mutilate on his main tank, dealing a fairly large amount of damage. Be prepared for this. He will also leap on random players and deal a fair amount of damage to them. Simply stay spread out to avoid multiple players being hit by this. There are several abilities in this fight that I have not mentioned, mainly due to them either not being present or simply negligible in raid fight. So as long as DPS focuses on one marked target at a time, Corvin the Prime is burned down quickly, and the tanks make sure that Rikal and Skier are not tanked by the same tank, and Zeril and Kilruck are not tanked by the same tank, and the Paragon should fall rather easily.
I, Garrosh, son of Grom, will show you what it means to be called Hellscream!
Garrosh Hellscream is the final boss of the Siege of Orgrimmar, and can be a very punishing fight, with multiple mechanics that can quickly wipe a group. Before the poll, one player needs to be designated as the Siege Engineer Killer, an ad I will talk about more later. And the tanks need to work out who is taking Garrosh at first, and who will be taking his ads. An experienced player should mark 3 locations on the ground as shown here. One location in the middle where Garrosh will be tanked, and the other 2 locations where ranged and healers will be alternating on. Again, I will talk more on the why later in the video. At the start of the poll, one tank will take Garrosh, while the other will grab the 2 groups of ads called Korkron Warbringers that will spawn from the 2 doors in the back left and right sides of the room, and they will bring them to the tank tanking Garrosh, whose obscene amounts of vengeance should quickly pull the ads off the second tank. These ads hit decently hard at first, but after around 30 seconds, Garrosh will cast Hellscream's War Song, which will immensely increase the damage the ads will do. Have cooldowns or stuns for the ads ready. A little while after the Warbringers spawn, a Farseer Wolf Rider will spawn. The ad tank, again, needs to grab this ad and pull it to the tank. DPS can largely ignore the Warbringers, though cleaves and multi-dots don't hurt, but the Wolf Rider needs to be single-targeted down fast. Now, in order to handle the ads properly without forcing the DPS to AoE or single-target them all down, tanks will use an Iron Star to help kill them. Now, to describe where this comes from, periodically throughout the fight, a Siege Engineer will spawn up on a ledge roughly in the middle, left, and right sides of the room. The designated ranged DPS needs to run over and kill the Engineer on the left side of the room only. Allow the Engineer to fire an Iron Star from the right side, as shown here. If the tank has positioned the ads correctly in the manner shown, he can move out of the traveling Iron Star's path, but still allow the ads, including the spawned Wolf Rider, to be struck by the Iron Star, dealing huge amounts of damage to them, often killing them outright in LFR difficulty. If you are having difficulty positioning the ads, you can ask a group for a knockback effects to blow the ads into the Iron Star, or run them into the path and have them rooted or slowed as you then maneuver out. The positioning can be a bit tricky, especially if the location is not marked properly. Do not be afraid to ask for some assistance. And, on the off chance that the Iron Star does not catch the ads, DPS must burn the ads down. Ranged and healers should be on one of the 2 other locations marked by the group. In a rough triangle as shown here, all ranged and healers should be here, as Garrosh will randomly throw a desecrated image of Gorehowl at a random ranged party member. Having even one person standing elsewhere risks that that person will be targeted by the weapon, which can easily throw off a group's positioning, making an already difficult fight even more difficult. When the weapon is thrown, it creates a large damaging void zone that deals a fair amount of damage. Ranged members need to move to the opposite marked location, and ranged DPS needs to quickly kill the weapon, removing the void zone. The ranged players then simply repeat this every time a weapon is thrown. Run to the opposite location, and burn the weapon down. This phase of the fight continues until Garrosh hits 10% HP, where he will then heal to full, and shortly after, suck all players into an image of one of 3 random locations in Mist of Pandaria: the Temple of the Jade Serpent, the Terrace of the Endless Spring, or Chi-Ji's Temple. Regardless of which one is chosen, the group simply needs to quickly as possible kill all Sha visible, and keep your eyes out for large orbs of light that will drop from random Sha in these areas. Running over these orbs reduces the damage taken by 50% while in these areas, though in Raid Finder, it's not incredibly essential. In Chi-Ji's Temple, the group must split and go down 2 separate flights of stairs directly in front of the group. Tanks need to make sure one of them heads down both ways, so work this out beforehand, or yell as your group is moving to which tank is going left and which tank is going right. Once all Sha are dead, Garrosh, who is previously unreachable by an unseen barrier, will become vulnerable and the group can attack him. He will spam an ability called Annihilate, which is a frontal cone attack fired in a random direction. Keep moving and do not get hit by this. The Annihilate will also damage the entire group for a smaller amount, so healers be prepared for this damage. Ranged, standing close to Garrosh makes it much easier to avoid this Annihilate, and easier for healers to heal. After 1 minute has passed since you transitioned into this area, players will be ported out and back into the main room again, where Garrosh will be engaged and Phase 2 will begin. No more Korkron, Wolf Riders, or Engineers will spawn. Garrosh will still throw his desecrated weapon, and the ranged need to handle it just like before. But now Garrosh will apply a stacking dot on his main tank, called Gripping Despair, that requires a taunt off at roughly 3 to 4 stacks. He will also periodically use a move called Whirling Corruption, which is a very large damaging AoE on the entire raid. Healers be prepared with cooldowns as necessary. Garrosh will also periodically mind control players in this phase. Players who are mind controlled need to be quickly burned down to 20% of their HP, where they will then be free. Mind controlled players do not actually attack. Instead, they simply cast Touch of Yasaj on random players. If the cast goes off, their target will also be mind controlled. This can spread through a raid very quickly and cause a wipe. This cast is interruptible, and it should be. Every few minutes, Garrosh will port the group back into one of the 3 random Mist of Pandaria locations, which again is simply handled as before. While in these phases, before all the Shah are defeated, Garrosh gains energy. At different levels of energy, his abilities become empowered. At 25 energy, his Whirling Corruption becomes empowered, spawning small Shah adds that should not be tanked directly. Instead, they should be spread out and killed by the DPS, as every time one dies, it fully heals and buffs all the other Shah adds within 8 yards. So do not kill them in range of each other. At 50 energy, Garrosh's Touch of Yasaj, his mind control, becomes empowered, and players who are mind controlled gain more HP that has to be burned through, and can no longer be stunned or CC, only interrupted. At 75 energy, his desecrated weapon becomes empowered, and it can no longer be fully killed. Tanks will need to begin kiting Garrosh at this point. At 100 energy, Garrosh's stacking dot will become empowered, causing it to cause additional damage as it falls off, and apply a stacking debuff that increases this extra damage. There should be no changes in how you handle this mechanic, however. When Garrosh hits 10% health, he will heal up to 25% health and fully fill his energy bar to 100, causing all of his abilities to become empowered. This is where all cooldowns and bloodlust should be blown, and Garrosh should be burned down. This is a rather long fight, and simple mistakes can often quickly wipe the group. Make sure to have ranged DPS kill the left engineer, and properly place the adds to be hit by the Iron Star in Phase 1. Make sure ranged and healers are all stacked and run between the 2 marked locations, and handle the desecrated weapon properly. Burn the Shah in the transition phases quickly. Don't get hit by Garrosh's Annihilate in the transition phase, and make absolutely sure to burn and control the mind-controlled players fast in Phase 2. Past that, simply keep up with the damage, be prepared for spikes of damage on the tanks, and just remember, with enough determination, anything is possible. Handle these mechanics correctly, and the corrupted war chief of the Horde will be brought down.